Those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it, they say. I want to welcome you to the 1 year anniversary of Design to Disrupt and Reimagine Education. Over the last 12 months, we've been building community, working to identify allies and ask the important question: how can we as education-focused entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs support the future of learning? So, exhaling, we're finally feeling those restrictions from the pandemic start to lift in a world where the largest taxi cab company owns no cars, the largest media company owns no content, the largest accommodations provider owns no hotels, the largest e-commerce company has no inventory, and the 70 plus billion dollar currency has no bank branches, no CEO, and no customer service department. How do we prepare the next generation of leaders? My name is Neferteri Strickland. I am founder of Teachers and a Benefit LLC that believes that Pennsylvania industry deserves a world-class Pennsylvania educated workforce. And today I want us to take an opportunity to reflect where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go together. And I am honored to introduce my partner in disruption, Benita Gordon. She is an entrepreneur, she's an edupreneur, she's an educator, and a podcast host. Benita, welcome.
Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday. As ESPN is giving me an update on the Steelers. That's that noise. I am excited about this episode. It is where we do all of the talking and then we start looking forward to the next thing to make sure that when we're disrupting the things that we're currently in, we're preparing to educate parents, the community, the students about what's coming up so that we are ready to move into the future. And that's where we are today. So I want us to get started. I think we have some questions, or do we want to introduce first?
It's up to you. Do you want to do polling questions, or do you want to just start off with Dr. Williams and Dr. Miori?
You know what, let's flip it today and let's start off, because we already had the conversation going. So let's start off with Dr. Williams and Dr., and I want to pronounce it right,
Miori.
Okay. And so we're going to start off with, if you two could introduce yourselves, and then we're going to start and jump into some questions and some Q&A. Audience members, as always, you can raise your hand and or put in the chat any questions and or comments that you want to share in D2D discussion today.
I can go first. I'm Ginny Miori. I'm a professor and department chair of the Department of Decision and Systems Sciences at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. And how I came to this, I guess, is probably a really good thing to say. I recently published a paper on trying to resolve unconscious bias in learning health systems. And Neferteri knew my co-author, I think, right? Did you know Kyle already? And reached out to Kyle to see if he was interested in participating. And Kyle said, basically, I was the wind beneath her wings. I did all her data, but she knows the stuff. So I came here with that, with this ideal that we're actually writing a volume on the development of a learning health system to alleviate unconscious bias in data that leads to healthcare that is unevenly distributed among demographic groups, marginalized people, things like that. So that is my story.
Guess I'm next. Hello, my name is Jeremy. It's actually Friday for me. It is 12:11 in the morning in Dubai. So I'm a day ahead of you right now, but it is my weekend because our work week is Sunday through Thursday here. So happy weekend to me. I'm really pleased to be with you. I'm a school principal, so lifelong career educator, was a math teacher in Gary, Indiana, and then was a vice principal and principal, and then a superintendent in Gary, Indiana. And then my wife one day said, hey, have you ever thought about moving and working in the UAE? I asked her what that was. I'd never heard of it, to be honest with you. And next thing, one thing leads to another, and I'm on a plane to Abu Dhabi, spent 4 years leading a school there. And now I'm leading 2 schools in Dubai, where I've been for this past year. new to a school community where 84% of the kids are home for distance learning. It's been an interesting environment to start building community with. But my passion is around how to leverage exponential technologies and how to bring them into the classroom, because what I see is that schools are focused on a lot of really cute technology that isn't necessarily facilitating the conversation around what it might be most prevalent in the future. So, I see a lot of VR helmets where kids are going on virtual field trips, which is really cool. And there is learning happening, no doubt, but there's a total absence of sort of conversation around artificial intelligence and machine learning in a thoughtful way, and financial literacy. There's not really much of a conversation around blockchain. And my new passion project is NFTs. So that's really about it for me. I'm going to yield the floor.
So thank you. All three of you all are educators, K-12 and higher education. And the school year has ended for you. You made it successfully. So I want to start. Benita has her hand up. How do you unmute your mic, Benita? I'd like to know from all three of you all. Benita first. How do you feel after this year, and what did you take away that you're about to take with you into the 2021-2022 school year?
I think for me, the first thing I took away was what I've already made sure, and what I've already done as a teacher, is that relationships matter. The relationships that I have with my students and their adults mattered the most when we went home on a Friday, not to go back again until the new school year. And even when we got in the new school year, we were still at home, then we came back, even in a quarantine. Like some of my parents were confused. Are you saying he can't come back? Or when can she come back? Or they don't have to log on while you quarantine? Ma'am, they can log on, they're at home. They just can't come to school because we're quarantined. And so having that relationship, so I'm always gonna take that with me. And then the second thing I'm gonna take with me is, does that really matter? And I say that in every aspect of, and we had a conversation today and we were talking about Crocs, kids and Crocs. And I said, and all of the teachers at the table realized, we don't want the house shoes. We don't want the slippers, but nobody cares about them Crocs. Come on in here, because it doesn't really matter to us. Like at this point, relationships, and does it really matter? Like, what am I teaching you? Am I teaching you what really matters? And it's gonna look different from every class to every kid to every demographics, but that's what I took away from this entire pandemic. Those are my two things that I'm definitely walking into. The summer, I'm in summer school, teaching summer school, and going into next year, like relationships. And does that, like, what? We came out of a whole pandemic. That's what you want to talk about right now? No.
I hear you.
Benita, what you're describing is very much, what my experience has been. It's very parallel to that. So in higher education, as I'm sure in K-12 education, being on campus is an important aspect of the transformative process. Kids mature together. They learn together. So it's the relationships and this ability to transform into what they're going to be for the next phase of their life, right? So this is one of the things that we've found is teaching our students virtually. Number one, as with everybody, not everybody wants to learn virtually, right? So, that challenge exists, but this whole idea that unless they're up, moving around to campus, interacting with faculty, interacting with staff, interacting with their peers, the transformational process that turns them into more mature people ready to embark on the next stage of their life is shortcutted. So I think to us going further, that's what the relationships and the community mean to us.
To provide a little levity, there was this conversation around when distance learning started. Will the teacher be replaced? Will physical school go away as we know it? And I can prove that it is not going away with one simple example. I have a son who is 7 years old, and I'm actually sitting at his desk because him and his brother are sleeping in my room right now. And my wife set up the baby camera on the desk while he was home for distance learning, just to keep an ear on what was happening. And at one moment, I heard my son on the iPad to his teacher, who is somewhere else, ask if she could get him a pencil, raise his hand and say he didn't have a pencil. And at that very moment, I realized there is no way that physical school can ever go away. It's just been disproved by this one example. But in all seriousness, I think the thing for me is I'm concerned at how a global pandemic has done very little to change the bureaucratic focus of standardized testing on education. And if a pandemic won't shift that, what will? And that is the part. I think educators have all prioritized relationships now, and they're all thinking differently about how to teach kids. And teachers want to be treated like professionals, and they want to have the professionalization of their career back. But I'm concerned about the push to move right back to standardized tests and to have that focus. And again, I just think if a pandemic isn't going to change it, if the whole global economy shutting down, travel shutting down, doesn't have an impact on changing that paradigm and that focus, I really worry about then what would.
Jeremy, I can say at the higher education level, the focus on standardized testing to enter universities and colleges has actually changed. But I'm with you on the K-12 world.
Yeah, I've seen that too. A lot of universities have dropped the sort of SAT score requirements and things of that sort. University of Chicago, I'm from Chicago, so that would be an example of that. And that is really, really great. But yeah, I think I'm worried about K-12, right? Because, as a higher educator, we're sending these kids to you. Our job is to prepare them for you, to serve them up ready for the rigors of higher education. And I just felt like this was an opportunity for states to reevaluate the priorities at K-12. And I feel like for the most part that from the federal level, that's been missed.
A member of the Roundtable, Lakeisha Harding, founder of Easel, she'd like to chime in. Lakeisha?
Hey everyone, can you guys hear me okay? All right. Well, I actually think that, and I've told Neferteri this in a few conversations, I think when the pendulum in K-12 for standardized testing is going to move will actually come this fall when we get these test scores back and we notice that there's not going to be a dramatic difference in their scores based on their projections from previous years. And that's going to do one of two things. It's going to either say, A, this test is inaccurate, which we've all been saying that, right, for a while, or B, the learning that is happening has never been enough. It's not transforming, right? So I think that they pushed these tests out this year because that's the question that I think they wanted to answer. With this quote unquote learning loss, how is this going to be reflected this year? We need to track it. We need to compare it to previous years. So we're going to have to wait till September, October, around when people start getting those test scores back to really see if then that moves that conversation forward. Because I think that's when it will. I'm not going to be surprised. I've talked to some teachers who even said, well, we've progress monitored and my students have progress monitored better than they have in the past. So what does that mean, for testing overall, for how we set up our day-to-day instruction and how we track it and all of those things? The conversation is far from over. And I'll be curious to see towards the end of the year kind of where it goes and how we start to redefine learning loss. And I do really quote that learning loss because I've been questioning, like, we needed learning what? What were they learning before? Like, loss of what? Exactly. Let's kind of define what that what is that they're losing. So I think it's just the beginning of that conversation. And I'm excited to kind of see where it goes. And that's my prediction. So if that happens, you guys can say I said it first.
We will, but I'm glad you brought up learning loss. I was having a conversation with other educators that I saw on Instagram. Somebody also posted it. And to us here in America, it's a learning loss. But the person who posted, and the person I was speaking to was a Syrian refugee. He had left, matter of fact, he used to be a teacher. I used to teach with him in Dubai. He had left his country, but grew up in the war. Like, when you listen to his story, there was sleep, the bomb dropped, on his house and family. He actually lost 2 siblings. They moved another bomb. Like he said, we just moved down the street because we moved to a house that was not destroyed. And I was like, what? And then listening to him, and then we were all in a group discussing, and he said, why is America keep talking about this learning loss? He was like, we were raised in the war, and we are fine. We go on to university. And he said, and when I say we're fine, he's like, I'm not talking about like the therapy we need. He said, I mean like learning, we are fine. Yes. He said, and we didn't, there were months and they didn't even go to school because the school was gone. And he was like, we go to university, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're teachers, we are okay. He said, and I'm baffled. He said, I'm baffled at times. He said, because there are countries that are in war on a consistent basis, and their children are able to still be educated. So that's the thing that when you do this, I was like, girl, yes, because we were already in the hole. We were already in a deficit. We are like 32 out of 33. I mean, like, what are out of the world, out of the global education system? So what are we saying? And I am like Lakeisha, like, and Jeremy, I'm watching you, because the forces that be haven't been in the trenches. I got us all off topic. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
No, I mean, to add on to that though, I heard in this, Benita, you're the one who actually teed this up for me. It was a conversation around decentralized education and the idea that, I don't think with kindergarten you can decentralize it, but with high school, potentially you could move toward more of a decentralized model with some sort of centers of excellence for kids to participate in passion projects or the arts, etc. But one of the things this principal said this, I never thought of this before. K-12 has to start to separate childcare from learning. And I never really thought of it that way, that education in the American context serves an economic purpose of childcare for children. And I mean, it's for all of us, like parents work and kids need a place to go during the day. And school, I don't know what percentage of it is that is this childcare component and what percentage of it is this learning component. But I had never thought about stratifying education at the K-12 level that way and thinking of it within those two lenses. And with more parents working from home and working remotely and sort of the economy changing, I just wonder what the sort of utility of the traditional sort of 8 to 3 school day will be for older kids in particular, is we see the economy evolve and change coming out of the pandemic.
And I'm going to steal from my daughter, who's about to start an educational policy doctoral program at Penn State. Her perspective is that our educational system was developed out of an industrial society. And now that we are a post-industrial society, we have to look at redesigning education so that we do catch up, so that we do teach our children and transform them so that they meet the needs of the world that they're going to enter when they go to college, when they enter the workforce. This is actually something that Neferteri and I had been talking about as well. And it's, she talks about how it parallels the change in commerce in the United States and how we've allowed education to just fall behind.
So I want to jump in because I've got so many little thought bubbles floating above my head right now. I just watched the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff speak about critical race theory and the need to explore research to better understand. And it has me thinking about the way that our systems are designed. And Jenny, you said that about how education is aligned with the second industrial revolution, but that industrial age, not where we are today, looking at the fourth industrial revolution. I know, Jeremy, you're here to talk about non-fungible tokens on the blockchain, but first, just looking at our systems and how we are using this space with Edupreneurs to design, to disrupt, and reimagine education. Jenny, what is your thought or advice to us, those of us that want to help the shift along? How do shifts happen, and how can wheels get greased, skids get greased?
So I'll tell you that some of the research that I've done in the past has had to do with student perceptions and student ethics and overall how students respond to the university environment. And I worked with someone who was a K through 12 educator, and we actually got to the point where we feel sixth grade is the latest point at which we have to begin, number one, to help our young women to understand their ability to contribute, and to not, we still live in a world where it's heavily biased. There are still biases that are brought into education. And if we don't begin addressing them by the time they're in sixth grade, we lose them. They become fully formed mentally, intellectually in some ways, and we just lose the ability to make that change. So one of the things that we discussed is the whole idea. Now, my field, I was a math major in college, my doctorate's in applied mathematics, and I'm teaching at a university. So my whole thing is STEM, and engaging those who haven't been engaged in STEM at a very early age is absolutely critical. Math should not be pain. It should be solving puzzles and doing things that helps your mind expand and helps you see what the world holds for you. That's what, and I'm not saying that like I think this is easy. I'm just saying that this is what my research has shown.
It's interesting in being in Asia and seeing that no one fears math the way that American children fear math. There isn't this sort of stigma to math. Kids aren't scared to learn it. They're not intimidated by the subject. And I think to your point, at the root of engineering, right, the E in STEM is sort of this idea of a lot of these 21st century skills like creative problem solving, critical thinking. And I think that, you're right about the systems having to change. And I think that we're just at this point where I think when you start looking at the minutes of what kids disproportionately spend time in school doing, and if you look at high school in particular is where I feel like it's the most egregious, like 94% of adults don't use any math above algebra 1 in their career, yet they spend predominant amounts of time taking calculus and AP courses. I think there's just a lot in high school where I feel like higher ed has shifted. To your point around like the standardized test requirements being dropped from a number of universities, industries even saying you don't necessarily need a college degree to work in our company. I think that high school is the next pillar to pivot. And I think everything goes down, right? Higher ed pivots and changes, and then high school pivots and changes, and then it works its way down to elementary. So I think the high school model is the most outdated of all. And it's interesting because even in seeing the British curriculum out here and seeing the Indian curriculum out here and seeing the IB curriculum, I still feel it's pretty much the same, where the high school curriculum is what needs to be molded and shifted next.
So there are a couple of hot button topics that I've been reading about lately, heavily with race being taught in the classroom. And there are states that have introduced legislation, some that have passed legislation, some that have nothing on the books just yet. But I've also seen legislation on financial literacy in the classroom, which we all, I'm sure, have always said they should do more of this in school, right? But again, that $70+ billion bank with no CEO, that's now a reality. So when we start talking about cryptocurrency, Jeremy, I want to bring you in because there are some here that want to hear about NFTs. And Jenny, I know at the foundation of a lot of that is math, right? Foundationally, the computation that has to happen. So Jeremy, will you help us understand, and Jenny, if you don't mind jumping in when you have the opportunity to explore this with our edupreneurs.
And Dr. Mori is quite the astute NFT person herself, as our little pre-talk engagement was letting on. But an NFT is a non-fungible token. Non-fungible just means unique. Token, it's a digital asset. And essentially, it lives within on a smart contract on one end of most usually the Ethereum blockchain. So what happens is you can, the most popular NFT project is one called NBA Top Shot. It's licensed from the National Basketball Association. And essentially it's digital basketball cards. You can buy packs of these digital moments. The moments are YouTube clips of NBA players making a play. And you know, it boomed like Bitcoin, right? What happened was it's still in beta, it's still not very popular, but people ended up buying and selling LeBron James digital moments for $250,000 US. And Steph Curry. And so there became a real demand for this. These NFTs are usually serialized. So there's a mint count, a certain number of them that are created. And in the NFT space, the lower the mint, the more valuable the collection is or the specific token is. So if in the Top Shot, NBA Top Shot world, you have a rookie moment, the first time an NBA player plays in the NBA, there's usually a mint of 4,000 at this stage of beta. A typical common moment has 40,000, right? But you get packs like you would, digital packs, you open them, and then there's a secondary marketplace where you can trade and sell them. Just to give you an idea on how big this is going and how quickly it's going, in April, the company that runs this program, Dapper Labs, had a valuation of 7.5 billion with a B US dollars. So for a product that most people haven't heard of, to have a valuation that high and come in that hot is really crazy. Now, the sort of commercial sports token is one aspect of this, but the other one that is even more fascinating is the NFT art space, where digital artists are creating their own art on one end of the blockchain and selling it for cryptocurrency, making collections. The most popular one is called the Bored Ape Yacht Club. This is a recent creation, which was 10,000 pictures of apes. They're randomized to have unique traits. There's a podcast on my podcast NFT where I describe this community in great detail. But I think what you have to know, if you want to understand why it's so interesting and why kids need to understand this, the Bored Ape Yacht Club was 10,000 apes that were created with random traits. So you opened a pack, or you opened your ape, you didn't know what it was when it was minted, and then it was revealed to you at a later time. They originally started selling for 0.04 ETH. This is roughly $100 US. One sold 3 nights ago for 55 ETH, $142,000. And this is a picture of an ape. Not only have these apes become valuable, these profile pictures, they're JPEGs, that's really all they are, but they are serialized on the blockchain. The 10,000 apes decided that they wanted to create their own merchandise, shirts, hats. They created their own shirts and hats. They were selling secondhand for 10,000 US dollars a piece. So a digital asset in the form of a picture of an ape, printed 10,000 of them. They have created their own streetwear brand that is now making tens of thousands of dollars per shirt sold, with no corporate CEO, to Nefertari's point, no big marketing budget behind them. It's a community driving the commerce. And that is at the sort of the heart of the NFT space. My 7-year-old started to make art, putting it as an NFT also. He makes collections of avocados, and all of a sudden they started selling. And what was remarkable was I witnessed my son, who has caring parents, a great school, really great teachers, good friends, just say he can't believe someone bought it. And I sort of realized that, like, as people started buying his art, he started to view himself as an artist and not a kid artist. And it started to make him feel like he could do and achieve. So I'm deeply interested in this space. And I think there's massive applications for schools. It's crazy and it sounds weird. And I get that. If you're hearing about this for the first time, you're going, but why would someone pay money for a YouTube clip of a basketball player? But once you understand the process of how it works, you can understand that people like to collect, and value is only, I guess, in the eyes of the beholder. If someone's willing to pay something, then it's worth that. So I'll stop talking about NFTs because I could go for like 6 hours on this because I'm so interested in it.
I think we want to go directly to, where is there an opportunity for educators, teachers, and those that support them to introduce this into the classroom and into learning?
So this is something, and at the start here, as we were sort of randomly chatting, the chair of our marketing department and I have been probably for the last year having that discussion. How do we bring NFTs into the classroom? And we've talked about, do we create a class that teaches people the process? And just as in many other classes that we have where there's a project that you endeavor to create your NFTs, and by the time you finish, you're selling them. And I mean, I'm going to be going back a little bit here when I say this, but the junior achievement model that used to exist, right? This is kind of the model that we're saying, okay, what NFTs though, like, what do we create? And that's, where I clearly get stymied, because I can think of, like Jeremy says about the NBA, and I can say to you, our basketball team is a Division I team. We're not top Division I, we're a smaller school, but we could do things like that with our players. We've had a few players go on to the NBA, and so there's great things like that. But we've also got esports that we've introduced, and NFTs having to do with our esports competitions. And so we in higher education are working to understand how we can make it fit into what is an existing traditional model of education, right? And I just wanted to, as a side point, Jeremy, you're talking about how we pivot down with things. Well, I can tell you the MBA program that we have in our university has just transitioned to being a certificate program, a stackable certificate program, right? So an individual who wants to get an MBA doesn't have to take this traditional set of classes that yields the MBA. They can get 3 or 4 stackable certificates that become an MBA. So what I'm seeing is we may be moving down that path. We're already moving in that direction in the business school, for example. You have a certain curriculum that makes you a business major, and then you have areas of study, right? So my department's area of study is business intelligence and analytics, and we also have a machine learning major, right? So students could do that stackable certificate, get that certificate in machine learning, and then go and get that certificate in finance, and ultimately build to a degree program. So there's a lot that's going on in this space that it's a lot to sort out. And we're trying to begin with, how can we build a class that helps students understand all of this?
So I would say there's 3 lenses to an NFT to think about its potential impact. The first is utility. And when I say utility, it's what does that token allow the person to do? So for example, take Top Shot as an example. If I attend a physical in-person NBA basketball game and I get the play of the game as a Top Shot moment put into my wallet, there's a utility for me. There's a benefit for me attending that game in person that benefits me, the collector. Gary Vee created his own NFT where owning the NFT allows you to have private access to him. He'll come on your podcast. He'll allow you to attend his annual conference. But I want to talk to you about a more interesting cross-section of how NFT art and utility meet, because I think, and then I'll get to your point around how do we get this involved in higher education, which I have some really simple ideas for that. There's a group called Sticky Keys. And what they did, when you bid for these NFT projects, you have to keep refreshing. You have to hit F5, 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 F5. You have to refresh to try to get, because when these projects are hot, the first time they sell, they go for very cheap, and then the floor starts rising on how much they're worth. So he just painted a digital, really simple picture of the F5 key, put it up, and sold it. Next thing you know, he gets the idea to make the whole keyboard. And then once he made 5 of each key. Well, then in the community, in their Discord, people play Scrabble. So if I own a U and you own an S, and there's a challenge where the creators of the collection will say, who can give us the largest animal with the most letters? and L is a double letter or something. So then people in the community have to get to know each other. They have to talk about, well, I have an S and a T. You have a space bar. We can make a compound word. Like there's all of this going on. And that sort of community that is organic and driven by the members, again, not by necessarily a big company. I think Dr. Miori, it's about studying marketing through the lens of an NFT project, through the lens of successful collectors and people who are creating these creations, because some of the things they're coming up with are, they're fascinating to me. And I think studying the human psychology of why people buy as a consumer is another sort of interesting way to look at what's happening in this space, because it's moving really quickly. But sticky keys these aren't very expensive. They're going for maybe 0.03, 0.04. I have a space bar. That's the only sticky key I own. But this idea of utility, what can I do with it beyond just the artistic, visceral beauty of the work, is what will drive this space going in the future. So imagine that you go to Chipotle, and every time you go to Chipotle, you get in your phone, on your app, your rewards app, instead of getting like the little points that you can get something for free. Imagine you get a sealed pack, where inside that sealed pack you could potentially get a golden burrito, and that golden burrito would allow you free Chipotle for a year. That sort of, think about when McDonald's has done Monopoly, or they've had these sort of gamified approaches to marketing. They typically draw in consumers. And so I think this idea of how your NFT, your token, creates utility is in community. These two things are sort of the biggest piece of this. And the art has to be cool. If it doesn't look good, people aren't going to mess with it either. So I think you have to have some art, you have to have some purpose, and you have to have some utility behind what you're doing. But I think if you look at that through the case study, and from a marketing perspective, you could have really interesting sort of conversations around how these, the Bored Apes just announced that they're giving all of the people who own an ape. So if I own ape number 9,462, they are going to give you a dog. They're minting you a dog, and it's the same random traits attached to the dog. The dogs are free for the Bored Ape members, but I want you to think about this. Those dogs off the bat, before they've even been released and seen, are going for 1 ETH. They're going for $2,000 on the secondary market. So the money that is being exchanged is very real. And then I saw 2 days ago, someone had created a panda project of 10,000 pandas, because everyone's going to knock off each other now, because they've seen this idea of the avatar is really beautiful. It's attractive to people right now. So what they said was, any ape who, when there's a sale of a panda, so let's say that panda number 2,461 sells, whoever has that corresponding ape will get 0.02 ETH put into their wallet. So they're paying royalties to these apes just because it's the coolest community to be a part of right now. The only other thing, and I don't want to get too meta, is that the other part about an NFT that's unique is, like, an ape right now can cost $140,000. This picture of an ape, I can't afford that. I don't know about anyone else. Maybe Neferteri can loan me the 140K, but I don't have it. So what they've also, you can do with an NFT is you can cut them into strips and pieces. You can fractionalize these assets. So this guy named Kylo Ren, I don't know his real name. I did a podcast episode with him. He had 49 apes. This is probably total now. I don't even know how much it's worth. But what he did was, people can't afford to buy an ape. He cut them into 5 million pieces and sold them as shares. So I own shares of these 49 apes in one CryptoPunk, and they have gone 10x the value of these shares of the apes just in a matter of 1 month. So there's a lot to take from this space. It is extremely volatile, but I think there's so much to be learned, and I think it could benefit people at all sort of levels of the educational spectrum right now.
One of the most unique things in my mind, hearing you talk about this, is value and perceived value. And for me and Gen X coming up, in education, the degree had a perceived value that, Dr. Miori is talking about, that kind of stackable courses that get me to a perceived value. But there's nothing that you said that I feel is out of the wheelhouse of a student in K-12 education learning. There was nothing that they needed a master's or a doctoral degree to get involved in, but it sounds very exciting, from basketballs to some type of cartoonish characters. Looking at the next school year, what can we implement? Can we introduce into education that's going to help with some of that engagement?
So I think that first, before you get into NFTs, I think if I was in a high school classroom in particular, I'd be teaching around DeFi and crypto, and understanding why parts of the world need decentralized finance, like why certain countries don't necessarily trust the government currency as their natural currency system. And I think that when you get kids some basic level understanding of blockchain in DeFi, I'm not talking about understanding crypto like, oh, Bitcoin is so valuable. This isn't what I'm talking about. I'm saying, like, from the understanding of, like, I think it was Cyprus, maybe in 2010, basically the government took people's accounts over, looted anyone who had over 10,000 US dollars because they were in a financial crisis. DeFi, for many people, and you talk about people in Africa where a huge percentage of people are unbanked, I think that would be the sort of global context that I would start with in understanding why there is a need for cryptocurrency and why people believe it's important. And then I think I could go into NFTs after that, because I think crypto is one of those things that it's been turned into this buy a Lambo, sexy, like get rich quick things. But I think when you think about its global applications in especially marginalized countries and people who have a huge need for another currency, I think that would be where I would start to give kids a perspective on why this matters. And I think the NFT part can come after. You start teaching about that as another token. I think it can make sense. I would love to hear Dr. Miori's take on that, and maybe where that would fit in from her perspective.
Honestly, as I'm sitting here, I'm taking notes furiously because I'm envisioning a major, an interdisciplinary major or area of study where you're looking at combining finance, marketing, analytics, machine learning, going to blockchain. It's sometimes hard to see where education is going and what we need to do to serve the community, but this is it's kind of thrilling, right? It's exhilarating to think about all the possibilities that exist here. And it's, and I'm telling you, I'm taking notes, and I found while we're sitting here on my other monitor, I found your podcasts. So, I'm looking at going back to our dean, who is constantly interested in moving things forward like this, and saying, let's try to be on the cutting edge of this. Let's do, when you talk about, and Neferteri, when you're talking about the largest bank without a CEO and the largest taxi company without owning a vehicle, it's all, for those of us who grew up writing things on pieces of paper with pens, it's a lot, right? But actually, you're really helping me to conceptualize how this can become a real opportunity for students.
And what's great about that is those indicators to shift that I was speaking about earlier. If industry says and higher education responds, higher education says K through 12 will respond. Right. I want to make sure that I leave enough time for Q&A. If you have a question, if you have a thought that you'd like to share, feel free to drop it in the chat, but you can also unmute your mic and become part of the conversation here at the roundtable. Dr. McCrae, I see you are here. Dr. McDonald, I see you are here as well. Please join Dr. Williams and Dr. Miori. I know that you all are thinking many thoughts.
Oh, yeah, I've been having a lot of thoughts. I want to kind of like jump in when you guys first started on, even with starting with the whole pandemic component and its effect in education. So, of course, I work in the technology component where I support educators in leveraging technology to support the instructional process. And so everything that you guys have been sharing today has been awesome. And I've been sitting here just taking notes too, because I have some ideas for my own podcast that I want to invite you guys on as a guest so we can further continue that conversation. Because I know also exposing others to understanding, blockchain is a process. And so everyone's not open to things because it's not an immediate need for them or an immediate importance for them. And I know that one of the things that was mentioned earlier, I think was mentioned. It was the cute technology. A lot of the schools focus on the cute technologies, and it's not that they're not great things, but like we have massive changes happening that's going to eventually affect all of us, and we need to incorporate those components and trying to find ways to bring that into the conversation so that students can really be prepared when they leave school to operate in our society. And even myself, so many things have changed just in my own lifetime, and being able to be adaptable and learn these different technologies that will eventually affect us. But like, how do we make that also an important factor for our educational stakeholders who make decisions to also understand is the question. And sometimes it's just bringing awareness and hoping to open possibilities for someone else to have that ear to listen in on why it's important to kind of ring a bell. But it's definitely going to be a process. I know, because like you guys were hitting on with the whole standardized testing, like why is this still such a big process or a need for us to define if our students are learning or not? And so that's what I wanted to add. I mean, I've been appreciating the conversation throughout. I have quite a bit of notes here. And so I look forward to hearing what else someone else has to say.
Hi, this is Dr. Tristika, and I'm the same. I'm sitting here taking notes because, I do an after-school program, and I also have an ambassador program where we teach teens and young adults how to create their own community action project. And I'm just taking the notes on how we can probably introduce this to our ambassadors, because they're just creating projects for their community. But how can we introduce this to after school programs as well? Because a lot of, when we open even more, a lot of students are going to be filling the after school program. So thank you so much for all this information. I have 2 pages of notes, but this is great. Thank you so much.
So I'm always going to go back to my heart and soul of why I do things. Train the educators. Just train the educators, train the teachers in the classroom, train our community stakeholders, train our parents. And when I say train, that means give them the information. And Brian put something in the chat that is always going to go back to something that I know he believes in wholeheartedly, and I believe in, and it is gamification. When we're able to train our teachers, and we have, like Dr. McDonald said, we have teachers that are open and ready to receive, and we're ready to move past what we thought we've been doing for the past 2 years was working. It wasn't. Let's go into the next channel, and then we bring it in as a group, and we're training the educators to prepare the students for jobs that have not been discovered yet. That's when we know we're doing our job.
Benita, you just said something that reminded me of a practice that one of my colleagues uses that is wonderful. He's a history professor, and he uses a classroom simulation called Reacting to the Past. And his entire course is split into several week segments where the students take on roles of people in history, and they kind of rewrite history through their own interactions. And my kids have taken these classes, and I know a lot of other kids who have, what they learn from them goes so far beyond learning about that historical time.
So when I listen to you all speak, what my mind sees is that innovation adoption curve. And it appears that many of us are in that early adopter, innovator phase of the continuum. And all parts are needed, right? It's not as though we only need a society of early adopters. What I'd like to see more of is us being mindful of the people that are just to our right, that we can talk to, that we can give our hand-me-downs of the latest, greatest technology to bring them along. So what does that look like in education? As we look towards the next school year, I want us here at the roundtable to think about what ideas we would like professionals, practitioners, researchers to come in and explore. July is like a buy for us. We will be broadcasting hybrid. I will be at 3675 Market Street. So that'll be very exciting. And what I ask is that next month that you represent your institution. If that's a high school, if that's a university, if it's your child's university. We talked about this a couple months ago, and my son is going off to college, so I'll be wearing a t-shirt representing his institution, and I ask you to do the same. So are there any last questions before I hand it over to last words to our guests? Please drop it in the chat or feel free to unmute your mic. Brian said me. Hello, Gary. Gary Johnson III.
Hey, Neferteri. How you doing?
Outstanding. Now that you're here, we were doing great. Now we're doing outstanding.
Please make sure you say his whole name.
The third. You're going to have to watch this replay, Gary. It's nice. So, Brian, you wanted to share. You want to unmute your mic?
Yes. First and foremost, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's well. I know this school year has been turbulent for many of us, very self-discovery for some of us as well, like myself. Neferteri, you asked one of the questions, what would we like to see this upcoming school year? So Benita, what you touched on was training. And as I've stated in the chat, the exemplar response for teachers, what I have encountered this school year was that there was a great expectation that came from teachers. The grace that was provided for students was in some capacity not provided for our adult counterparts. I received pushback when I tried to introduce students to new technologies, right? But then the expectation was for us to learn new technologies as the school year went along. So those type of things is what I would like to see. And also demonstrate what we are experiencing, right? As teachers who are entering, I want to say, more technological space, what are we going to be using and what does it look like when it is used? We're not just being given hammers and nails and told to go build a house. We're being given programs and games and told to instruct, especially for teachers that are either creating their own curriculum or being provided a curriculum, right? So just keeping it simple with training. And then the second thing I would like to see is more diversity in the projects that are being created. As I've stated prior in many of these conversations, is that we deal with a diverse group of students who are not just athletes, but also not just scientists. And what do you do with that space of students who are creative, but it's more in a managerial sense, right? What do you do with those students who have the artistry, but none of the projects in the school include the artistry that they can perform? What do we do with that talent? What do we do with that value? How do we, in a way, repurpose the items and resources that we have at the school so everybody can be involved in the school process, right? And then we can also dive into the personal development of our young people and our teachers, because when we look at it, STEM and problem solving, our students need empowerment in their own communities, and their own communities are their homes. Their own communities are their cities. And the value that they're receiving in the classroom, it has to translate into them being able to solve the issues that they're experiencing firsthand. And if we're not providing that skill, we're not enhancing the students' ability to type, if we're not enhancing their ability to perceive resources and handle issues individually on their own, while also teaching themselves new bodies of information, the future that we're looking forward to is not going to work. It's just that simple. And I'm gonna leave it like that.
Designed to disrupt and reimagine education. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to make space for the next session. Dr. Miori, Dr. Williams, Dr. McDonald. Thank you all, Dr. McCrae, Benita, Lakeisha. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in July. I'm Neferteri Strickland. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.